First of all, I will ask the four people here to introduce themselves. And maybe I will start with Barbara. We heard you a little bit earlier on, but just if you want to say a few more words.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Barbara Steenbergen. I'm representing the International Union of Tenants in Brussels, and I'm head of the Brussels office there, and busy in EU lobby, in EU policy, of course. And I'm very happy that we have this project together with Secodas, actually the first project we are doing together, and Delphis on responsible housing. And yeah, I hope that your tenants can bring an added value to this project. Thank you.
Okay, we'll continue with ladies. Ladies first, as we say. So maybe Therese and Sabo, if you want to comment.
Okay, yes. Hi, Therese Berg is my name. I work at Sabo in Sweden. Sabo is the Swedish Association of Public Housing Companies. We have about 300 members companies, and those are public housing companies owned by the municipalities in Sweden. We do not call it social housing. It's a housing for everyone. We do not have any maximum limited for incomes. Our members encompasses almost 20% of the housing in Sweden. And we do not get any support from the Swedish state, so it's a bit different from a lot of you. Yeah.
Okay. ADIS?
Yes, thank you. My name is Alexander Luiten. I work for ADIS, the Dutch Association of Social Housing Organizations. We have been founded, or our legal predecessors rather, have been founded exactly 100 years ago. So tomorrow we'll have a big party with the Dutch king even. We have by now 400 members. There used to be much more members, but a lot of merging has been going on over the last 25 years. So we've been reduced to just under 400 members by now. And what we do is that we are a platform for members where they can meet and exchange views. We safeguard our members' interest. That is our core business, in fact, the lobby. That's what I do as well. I used to come to this kind of meeting before in Brussels and so on, but now I mainly work in The Hague in the lobby. And we give our members advice and information. And last but not least, we also operate as an employers organization. So we conclude collective working contracts for the 25 or so workers in our social housing sector.
And we'll end with NABCO.
Hi, my name is Niall O'Keefe. I work with NABCO, which is the National Association of Building Cooperatives in Ireland. As the title suggests, it's a cooperative organisation. We're much smaller and much younger than the associations my colleagues here represent, but we do dream, and we dream big. So we're quite ambitious in terms of where we're going. I would like to point out actually that I'm accompanied here by a member of the cooperative, a member tenant in the organisation, Declan Hudson, who's the president of our organisation. He took time from work to travel here to be to this event, and I'll talk more about NABCO later on. Thank you. I have the microphone again. Yeah. I'd like to acknowledge...
Just to introduce, I asked the participants to answer one of these 4 questions around CSR. The first one was CSR and stakeholder engagement, because we decided to focus on that. So the first question was, why do you think that stakeholder engagement is important, and how does it relate to corporate social responsibility? Then I asked them to provide some concrete examples, so we will see that. We will have a focus on accountability, because I mentioned that this is something very important. So accountability and impact measurement. And maybe, if we feel so, we will also talk about risks and difficulties that may be encountered when talking about stakeholder engagement and stakeholder involvement. So this is the general frame of this discussion and roundtable. Niall, now it's up to you.
Thank you, Charlotte. I know in Denmark the standard of storytelling is very high. Mine isn't as high. I'm going to start at the end. The best example I can give is that just 2 weeks ago in Dublin, we booked a hotel where we had our first ever award ceremony. It was part of our celebration of being a 40-year-old organisation. But what was significant for us and what we were marking this year is that in the last 3 years, we've moved from less than 5% member participation, I'm talking about tenant member participation in housing management, to more than 25% in 2013. Much of it was low level, much of it was small community activity. I have some photographs that I'll show you. But the critical thing is that people have a greater understanding of cooperatives, they have a greater understanding of belonging, and they're quite eager to participate in more events. So that was one aspect of what we were celebrating. And the other aspect was that in 3 years we have grown in size, even though we are very small, we've grown in size by more than 40%. And with the program of development that we have in place over the next 3 years, we will be close to doubling in size in a very short period of time, which brings its challenges. But what we can quite categorically state is that all of those developments and all those advancements are based on engaging more with our members and more strongly with our members. Where it began for us was in 2010. Capital funding from Irish government was cut from 100% to 0%. And obviously, that's a time when you not only look strategically at what you're doing, but you look at, should you be doing anything, what's your role, what's your function, and what's your purpose. And at that point, we revisited our vision statement, which had been written 40 years earlier. And the vision statement spoke about a responsibility to alleviate deprivation and poverty through the provision of housing and or any other means. And when we analysed it, we felt that the vision statement was still relevant, but we as an organisation were too focused singularly on housing. So we wanted to incorporate what does and or any other means actually mean. What we did is we changed our brand, and I think you might have seen it in one of the earlier slides, where we've changed from cooperative housing to cooperative living, which has given us a freedom and a flexibility to look more holistically at the needs of us as an organisation and to look at the needs of the membership. The next thing we did, because we were challenged with resources, and we were on this cycle of using our resources to meet with the same people, to talk with the same people, but some of those people didn't have the same relevance or the same power or the same importance. So we carried out a social network analysis, and we literally, it was, quite crude. We hand drew everyone that we met, how often we met them, where my time was spent. And there were two major deficiencies in where our time was being spent. The first was with our membership. We clearly did not spend enough time communicating with the membership of the organisation. The next serious deficiency was in terms of staff. What we did with the membership was we put forward, I think I have a slide here outlining some of the things that we thought cooperative living would encompass. We were already providing childcare and community services. There was people interested in support for older persons living at home because of the ageing population, social care, obviously employment. Ireland 4 or 5 years ago, we were looking at 20% plus of unemployment. This week the figures are down to 12.9%, which is positive, but it's still an issue in many of the communities where we work. We have huge numbers of resources. We have 35 communal facilities across Dublin, which are not being utilised to their maximum. So we wrote to our members and we carried out a survey outlining all of these issues and outlining where we thought we were going. We had a very positive response in that 60% of people, I should say, responded to the survey. What was alarming for us was that while people were generally happy and liked the idea and the notion, very few people wanted to participate. And when we tried to analyse that, what we saw was that people didn't want to participate because they felt that there was inequity of the quality of service, management services that we were providing across our stock. So if you had a broken boiler, you might get a different service in one office than you would in another office, and that's obviously not acceptable. And if their heating's not working, or if there are basic issues, or if there's an annoyance with the organisation, they're not going to participate. When we spoke to staff, one of the issues with staff was that they weren't participating enough in the discussion. There wasn't a developmental program for staff. There wasn't an opportunity for them to express their ideas. There was no guarantee that there would be succession to any post that they were working in. So what we did was, I'm narrowing down lots of meetings here to a very short period of time, but we set up a development program whereby staff have been trained to, diploma degree, master's, doctorate level, some of them in specific areas that would be beneficial to the organisation. One of those was in the areas of quality service management and quality service provision. We married that with the concerns and the complaints from members, and we used some of them, again, low level, but we used that as a model of people getting involved. If you've got an issue, you come and you talk to us, and we'll start resolving those. What that did was break down barriers of communication. What it did was develop relationships and friendships between more staff and more members. And we went a step further. We said, we're not going to be the biggest in our jurisdiction. We're certainly not going to be the biggest in Europe, but we can be the best. We can aim to be the best. So at that time, we brought together, in Ireland, there's a business system, a Q-mark system, which have certain requirements. We felt there were deficiencies in that because it didn't cover the cooperative needs and it didn't cover sustainability enough. We also have new frameworks being introduced in Ireland about regulation of charities, and as we speak, there are new regulations being brought out in relation to the regulation of housing providers. So we put all the requirements of those 4 certifications on one sheet, and one by one we put the resources into it, but we ticked the boxes with the members and we started tackling all of those issues. The result of that was that we became the first housing provider in Ireland to receive a quality mark for housing service provision this year. We were shortlisted for being the best company in the country. We became the first cooperative organisation to affiliate to the Canadian cooperatives, and we achieved the 2020 Global International accreditation, and we received the other marks. And the impact that had was that members could see that we were achieving things, that their needs, their requirements, staff were more confident that we were moving forward and achieving goals that had been set. We carried out another survey. The level of interest was far higher in members, the level of satisfaction was far higher in members, and the level of satisfaction with staff was also far higher. There was still a disconnect between the theory of what we're doing and the practice of what we were doing. So we used a number of the committees, and certainly the strong key people that had turned up in terms of the quality mark work, to participate taking on other local community development tasks. And I'll show some photographs very quickly here in relation to that. Having the Q mark and achieving all of these things raised the profile of the organisation substantially. And the net effect of that is when you're in an environment where there's no funding available, and private financial institutions see that, okay, you might be a not-for-profit as they describe it, you might be a charitable organisation, but you're professional and you have standards. It became easier for us to attract funding. I'm not saying we've solved it, but it's easier, and we are developing, we are growing on a wider basis. I'm just going to show some photographs here that, we have 4 childcare facilities, 200 children on a daily basis are using those. The impact of those is that it's released parents into education, into employment. Also in a number of the childcare facilities, parents became childcare workers through training with the organisation, and in fact some of them are now working for us. So we spent a substantial sum of money in 2013 organising, as I say, low-level events to get as many people as we could involved in tidy-ups and clean-ups, visiting zoos, but more importantly, starting to participate in the democracy of NABCO. With talent competitions and, as I say, greater than 25% participation, and the year isn't over yet. So this is one of our meetings with members and staff deciding on various events. This is hugely significant to us. That this is a development. It was the handing over of a Q mark. Obviously, it's not that size really. But the building was the first private finance building in Ireland, and it was also the first private finance to use one of our unfinished housing estates, which again created a lot of publicity and positive developments for us as an organisation. Where we're going next, we're a small turnover, but what we want to do and what we've started to do is use our own revenues, use the members' rent to create employment for the members and create enterprise. So on every line of our balance sheet where we see there's an expenditure, we see can we spend that money more appropriately, more effectively, more efficiently, and more importantly, can we get it back to the members by way of employment, by way of training, while sustaining and maintaining the quality standards of what we do. So there are things that was mentioned earlier, security on building sites. We can provide that. We can provide waste collection and waste management. We have a lot of work to do in this, but we're really happy. We have our first 4 vans on the road with our logos driving around the place. We've also been working with members. This is one of our vans here with Dame Pauline Green, who's the president of the ICA. This is an important photograph for us as well. We focused, finance is more readily available for retrofit work. Some of our stock wasn't old enough to qualify for some of the funding that's available. And again, we worked with members and we said, look, if we can save you X amount of money per week based on investment now, which is premature to what cyclically you should be receiving the money, will you invest with us? So NABCO invested some of its reserves, a lot less than it would have had to do at a future date if we were carrying out this work. And we received grant aid from the government. So this is, a number of our members, the Minister for Energy, and ourselves. It's a token photograph, but what it's showing is that in the last year we have completely renovated and invested hundreds of thousands of euro in renovating homes, creating employment, creating better quality of life, and tackling the issues of fuel poverty. I hope, Charlotte, that I answered the question. I suppose one question based on what you were saying is what our learning was as an organisation. One of them was that we've become keenly aware that what we think we're doing we may not actually be doing. So things that we were patting ourselves on the back for and taking for granted that we were very good at, we weren't as good as we really thought we were. And by discovering that and by tackling those issues, we have become much stronger as a membership, as a staff, and so on. The other point that I would make, if I could list all the stakeholders, but I can't today, I would mention my colleagues and all of you and all the people that we've learned from in the last 3 years. And the thing that we've really learned is don't reinvent the wheel. When we're looking at older care, I know it's been going on with some of the Swedish companies since 1942 and other organizations before that. I know there are other countries that have been doing renovations before we have, and we've learned hugely from all of our colleagues from that. So in terms of stakeholder, we've actually engaged somebody for the first time in policy and communication who's taking the time to read all the documentation, read all the grant funding, and summarizing for the rest of our staff and seeing where there are opportunities for us and for our members to grow stronger as an organization. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe this is a very good start, and indeed, I think it answers the question on also why is it important to rethink what you are doing and do that while involving your stakeholders, in particular members, tenants, but also your staff. And I think it's very important to stress that. And I think this answers the question of what this can bring to an organization and how it helped you improve your organization. And maybe we can move to, now we are going to Sweden. It's good because we're going to travel a little bit this afternoon. So we're going to Sweden and maybe see how, in one very specific example, how stakeholder engagement can benefit to a specific area. We were on the organization side in Ireland. Now we are going at the local area aspects of that.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I'm going to tell you about a company called Gårdstensbostäder. Gårdstensbostäder won the SABO award for the sustainability award. That was the first time we had this award this year, and Gårdstensbostäder was the winner. This is what Gårdsten looked like in 1997. Gårdsten is an area located in Gothenburg city, but it's about 15 kilometers from the city of Gothenburg, and it's quite isolated from the rest of the city. And as you can see, or you don't see, but we saw earlier, I'm not sure of the name, the architect that showed us a lot of photos of the houses that was just repeating and the same architect, and that's what Gårdsten looked like, pretty much. Gray, vandalism, higher crime rate, and Gårdsten has about 2,700 dwellings. And at that time, I think it was about 800 vacancies in the area. At that time, the flats were mostly owned by two different public housing companies in Gothenburg, all owned by municipalities. I'm just going to refer to them as the public housing companies, but they are owned by the municipalities. But in '97, they decided to create a new company, to create a new public housing company, just in Gårdsten. Earlier, the other companies had houses all over the city, but now they created this company, Gårdstens Bostäder. And the mission from the owner was very clear. They had to take a grip not only they had to do more than take care of the house. They needed to take care of the whole area. Their mission was to develop the whole area as a total. So that means you cannot only work with the houses and renovate the houses, but you also have to work with the tenants, the people who live there. You also have to work with the entrepreneurs, the shop owners, the school, and so on and so on. And in the beginning, they decided that the tenants who lived in the area took place in the board. So the board for the company has, I think, mostly tenants who live there in the area, and that is something that has been, how do you say? But through the renovation and through the whole work, they have always worked in a close dialogue with the tenants who lives there. They've also, just to mention, and as you say, the importance to have a dialogue with stakeholders. They have worked a lot with the entrepreneurs in the area. They had no bus link that went directly from Gårdsten to the city of Gothenburg, but after 5 years they got that. They didn't have a bank machine where you can withdraw your money, but I think after 3 years they got that. They worked in a close dialogue with the tenants. What did they wanted to do with their houses? They had regular meetings and all the time. Today, the area looks like this. As you can see, the houses are much nicer. It's a safer area today. They have constantly worked with the three dimensions of sustainability: the social dimension, the environmental dimension, the economic dimension. I've already mentioned that they have tenants in the board. Every Wednesday, as just for an example, they have done so many things. I could sit here all evening, but I'm not going to do that. But every Wednesday, the staff work in the evening, and they have meetings, different kinds of meetings, where they invite the tenants or the shop owners or other people who are doing stuff in Gårdsten. They can have education about what it's like to be a parent, or they can talk about renovation. They can talk about the environmental questions. As you can see, they have also, if we're going to talk about the environmental dimension, they have put sun cellar up on the roof. They have also built a big greenhouse down, I think you can see it down there at the bottom. And that's a meeting place now for the tenants, where they can grow their own fruit and their own vegetables. They have also now put sun cellars on the balcony roof. And the surplus, I think they deliver to the district heating. So today, they have no vacancies at all. and they've won a lot of awards. They have a lower crime rate, and they have, in '97, I think they rented to 8 entrepreneurs, and today they have 50 entrepreneurs there in the area. They've also worked with their entrepreneurs and asked them to sponsor commercial homework. I'm not sure what the English word is, but they organize homeworks just to help the schools and the job so that everyone can get an education. So the entrepreneurs put some money in, and then they can buy professional help for homework. So if you would like to go and look at a good example of how you can take a whole grip of an area where you can work with the 3 dimension, then I think Gårdstensbostäder in Gothenburg is a good example.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it is indeed a good example, and in some way it goes back to what we saw this morning about also creating spaces and opportunities for people to meet and discuss, and this question of social link between people. So that's one interesting point. And the other thing is also how you actually had to, or you, actually the company had to work and convince the other partners, the private companies, but also the authorities to invest also in the area, because as you rightly said, one housing company cannot solve all these issues relating to such areas and conditions. It has to rely on others, and to do so, it has to convince. And the paper which describes this example also mentions how tenants helped in that, in a way, because tenants expressed their needs, and the company could also use the voice of tenants to wait on and to have a way to convince the authorities to invest and the companies to invest in the area. And I think that's also a very, very interesting point.
Yes,
I think. Yeah, no?
No, that was me.
Sorry.
No, but that's important, because I think that in '97 the tenants felt like nobody cared. I mean, they couldn't even withdraw money in their own area, and this is an area that's the size of a smaller city in Sweden, and I don't think they even had doctors or dentists or just commercial service, and that's important to feel like we care about you and we see you.
Yeah, and actually in the paper it's also mentioned the work that had to be done on trust, in a way, how to restore and build trust of tenants by showing that you're answering and you're at least doing your best to answer concretely their needs. So I think, well, this example, you can find it also on our website. It's a little bit advertisement for me. So now we will move to the Netherlands and maybe ask Alexander to present something about ADAS. Yeah, it should work.
Yes, thank you very much. Upon your request, I tried to focus on the issue of legitimacy and the way that Dutch social housing organizations are trying to involve stakeholders in policy making and in the way that that the social housing organizations account for what they've been doing to stakeholders. Therefore, it is good. I won't go into very much detail, but it's good to step back a bit and realize what kind of organizations Dutch social housing organizations are. They have been private initiatives, so they're private companies registered by law to fulfill some public tasks, to operate for the public good. And we shall see that this combination of a private nature and operating for the public good well, brings about some tension in your way of operating. looking at the legal form, which is also quite important for the discussion we have about legitimacy right now, looking at the legal form of Dutch social housing organizations, by law they are only allowed to be associations or foundations. So the cooperative form, which a lot of you have in your countries, is not allowed in Holland right now, which could be an answer, I'll come to that later, but which could be an answer to all kinds of questions about legitimacy. Every Dutch social housing organization, albeit a foundation or an association, has a board, but also a compulsory supervisory board who is supervising the board, the executive board, which is often one person, the managing director. And in the light of all kinds of developments in society, there is a growing need for the legitimation of operations. It used to be like this, that social housing organizations started as private initiatives, but gradually the public domain was taking over. So until, well, let's say the 1970s, the public domain was very decisive in all kinds of ways for the way that social housing organizations were operated. That changed dramatically, quite dramatically, in the 90s when a balancing act was being adopted, by which social housing organizations in Holland became financially independent. And it was there, mainly, that this whole legitimacy issue started to come up. Economic circumstances were very favorable in the 90s and later on. So social housing organizations, who were by then financially independent, were getting richer and richer, which was not what politics had intended originally. So they started to do all kinds of things, and more the question came up in politics and in society, who was owning these social housing organizations with more and more money, and whom they were operating for. In the beginning, this was quite obvious because they were founded by, for instance, churches or trade unions or big companies who had to house their employees. Well, that was, or they were associations in the beginning as well, and therefore the members were the owners, which was quite obvious. But ever since this financial operation by which they became financially independent, this was getting more and more unclear, and therefore there was a growing call in society for looking at the legitimacy of social housing organizations again. And we have also within ADES, and our members have also felt this, and therefore we have tried to take some initiatives to address this issue. What we have, for instance, is within ADES is a code of conduct and a governance code, which means that social housing organizations, the board of a social housing organizations, is obliged by this code, which applies to over 90% of the Dutch social housing organizations. The board is obliged to involve stakeholders in policy making, and also obliged to account for the achievements and the way that policies have been implemented, to account for to the stakeholders afterwards. The Board of Supervisors is obliged to supervise this specific point. One of the main problems in this case is that Dutch social housing organizations are very, very different. The largest ones have about 80,000 houses, and the smallest ones have only 40, 50 houses. So they are completely different companies, and what is good for one kind of company is completely unworkable for the other one. So we have tried to develop all kinds of different practices to implement this obligation to involve stakeholders. For instance, some of the largest social housing organizations in Amsterdam, for instance, they have a stakeholder council. They have a different body within their organization which has, well, several rights. to give advice in policy making, and even a right of veto in some cases for certain fields of policy. Not so long ago, there was a project of law in Holland to try to make this obligatory for every social housing organization in the Netherlands. But well, partly because of our lobby, I have to admit, this never became law, fortunately. And we lobbied against it, not because as such we thought it was such a bad idea, but it was in practice not manageable for the smaller companies who are maybe 80% of our members. I mean, if you just have a few hundred dwellings and a few people working in your office, it's completely unfeasible to establish a large stakeholder council with all kinds of very extensive and complicated policy making. So this is not obligatory, but in some bigger social housing organizations, this body, this stakeholder council, has a place. A somewhat looser form is that of the stakeholder conference. A number of social housing organizations have chosen to organize stakeholder conferences once or several times a year, at which they ask for input from the stakeholders. They put proposals to the stakeholders and ask for input on them, and then they try to involve the stakeholders in that way. And of course, afterwards, at a next stakeholder conference, they report back, they account for what they've been doing with the input before and what the results have been. A third thing that is going on right now, I already mentioned that before, is the cooperative form. As it is now, for social housing organizations in Holland, the cooperative form is not an option. It's excluded by law. But one or two social housing organizations are trying to experiment with it in the way that they have appointed a number of their stakeholders on their board, which is a very interesting experiment, but there are no results as of yet. But we have to see what it's going to bring. A last point that I would like to address before my time is probably up is the difficulty in choosing and appointing stakeholders. In Holland, we have separate legislation for, well, what you could call the most important stakeholders for social housing organizations, who are obviously tenants, and also municipalities who get a special position by law. But obviously social housing organizations operate in a broader field, so they also want to involve, for instance, care institutions, social workers, all kinds of institutions and bodies in the social and public field. So we are still trying to find solutions to the question who our stakeholders are, and we think so far that this is well, this varies very much according to the place you operate. So this is very much a local thing.
Indeed, I think. Sorry, you wanted to add? No, you were talking about legitimation or legitimacy of housing association, but we could ask the same question for stakeholders. Which are the legitimate stakeholders to? Especially if it's about making a decision or taking part to the decision-making process. So I think this question of the legitimacy of stakeholders is very important. And maybe one of the answers is also that you have, and we've seen, different levels of involvement. I mean, you can have involvement in decision-making, but also in needs identification, in the forms of suggestions and inputs from your stakeholders, but also on very local-based, concrete implementation. And this is another way of engaging and involving your stakeholders. So I think that's the comment that I wanted to make. Maybe you want to add something on...
Well, about your last point, to conclude, to define stakeholders at different levels and also define that the rights that you attribute to them on different levels has been elaborated quite extensively in the legislation which applies to tenant participation in Holland. But still, there's a lot to be improved. But that is a good example. As far as the other stakeholders are concerned, nothing much has been elaborated. So there's still a lot to be organized.
Well, thank you very much. We still have a few minutes, and I wanted to maybe end on also this question of legitimacy, and which is very much linked to accountability, as you mentioned, because being seen as legitimate, being accepted, is also a big part is about accounting for your action and being transparent on what you're doing. And I wanted to maybe ask Therese to present a project that you are working on about impact measurements in Sweden.
Yes. This project is really about, well, you can say two different questions. One is the CSR report that you spoke about earlier. How do we present our CSR work? How do we communicate what we're doing? And maybe mostly I think about the social projects and the social investments that the housing companies are doing. We've been doing reports about economics and environment for quite a few years now, but we still haven't, we're not as good, not in Sweden anyway, to show the efforts from, or the results from our social projects and our social investments. And I guess it's not as easy to count. On the other side, or the other proposal was that, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Swedish case. But the public housing companies in Sweden got a new law 2011, and just to be short, it says that the public housing in Sweden now have to act more business-like, that's not, it's not easy to explain, and we are still interpreting it, but some people say that they should act like the private landlords, but still, the public housing in Sweden have a social responsibility. So you have to balance. You have to act like business-like, but still you have to take a social responsibility. And how do you do that? So that's one of the questions that we've been asked a couple of researchers to study those questions, and I think I have them. If you can just push.
It's on the, it's here, I think.
Oh, yeah. So we have asked them to focus on these questions. What is social responsibility for the Swedish public housing? What does it look like? What is public benefits? Normally we say that the public housing in Sweden are supposed to provide homes for everyone. But what else is it in the public benefit and the social responsibility? And they also been asked to study how do the public housing in Sweden work with these questions right now. Has there been any changes since the new law came? And we also asked them to look at the relationship between the owners, the municipalities, who often maybe are the ones who invest in the social projects and social investments, and the housing companies. Should a housing company in Sweden have a fritidsgård? Not a children's service, but you know, where the youth go after school, just to have a place to go after school, to be somewhere. Is that a task for a housing company because they need to? The youth in the housing area need to have something to do in the spare time, or is it a task for the municipality? And last but not at all least. We've asked the researchers to find methods or tools to help the housing companies to show their CSR work. How do you count on your social investments? how can you say that this is business-like, this balance with business-like principles? So they have just started. We haven't seen, or they started in April, but we haven't seen any results yet. But they are supposed to, should be finished by April 2015.
Okay. Maybe 2 reactions from my side, and then I will leave you the floor. I think that the third point is very interesting. What's the role of the municipality or local authorities, and what's the role of housing companies? And in France, for example, our housing companies may be asked to take on more and more responsibility on the areas they're working on. Is that their role? It can be, but in that case, maybe it should be written down. We were talking about partnership and early on, and how to formalize the partnerships and the roles and responsibilities of each party. And I think CSR, it's also about that. How do you contractualize? How do you formalize the roles and responsibilities? And the last point, of course, I'm interested in that very much, because we've done a similar research in France, in Delphus. But I've seen many different studies going on in different countries, and I think it's a very important point. The sector, the social housing sector, or affordable housing, or public housing sector, is more and more being questioned by the European Union, by the private sector, by society in general. What is its role, and is it really necessary, and what does it bring actually to society? And I think this is something we should work on and try to demonstrate and measure. That was my point. Maybe you want to react, Niall or Alexander?
In reaction to your point about the relationship between municipalities and housing companies, in Holland, this is a very hot topic right now, because with regard to the question of legitimacy of social housing organizations, the solution is being looked for in especially the relationship between municipalities and housing companies. The idea in politics is there's a revision of the Dutch Housing Act going on right now, and in this new Housing Act, municipalities get a much stronger position. I already said that social housing organizations had become, well, in someone's eyes, maybe a bit too rich and too powerful compared to municipalities over the last 20 years. Well, this clock is going to be put back right now with the new Social Housing Act, and the idea is that municipalities, by their very nature, with locally elected city councils and so on, by their very nature are the vehicle to make sure that if they control the social housing organization, legitimacy is being guaranteed almost.
Maybe Niall, I don't know if you have reaction or comments or.
I find this a very challenging point to respond to. In Ireland, I mentioned earlier, the funding is gone towards housing. And the approved housing bodies, the housing providers, are now being asked to leverage their assets with bonds and with investors and with various groups to fund future housing. And it's very challenging, because some of the works that they're asking us to engage in are some of the decisions that are being directed towards us rather than being consulted on, challenge our values. And as we all know, we all work in the political world, it's very challenging to find the right line between achieving your goals, maintaining your values, and contributing constructively to the political debate. And that has been very challenging for us. Particularly, it's unusual. We actually say no to projects, and we know that affects us sometimes in the short and medium term. But we know in the long term people come back to us because they know we only get involved in projects that are long term, are sustainable, and that have meaningful value for the stakeholders involved there. But it's a fine line, we get it right sometimes, we don't other times.
Maybe I'm going to ask now Barbara to react to what has been said and give us the stakeholders, or at least the tenants' point of view, and then we will open the floor to the questions of the audience.
Yes, thank you again for inviting us. Yeah, perhaps I start with some. First of all, I have no presentation. I hope you don't mind. I want to start a little bit from a macro level. I give you, perhaps as the beginning of my speech, I give you a very nice quotation from our stakeholder forum we have on responsible housing, on the project we have together. I think it's quite remarkable. The best way to be a responsible housing provider is to have a very big housing stock. So what does it mean and who said it? Guess what? It came from the Austrian. What does it mean? I think, let's say, the main thing that we have to think about at this time is to rethink what we are doing. What is our business model and what do we really want to achieve? Actually, I think the social housing provider should have as much as affordable housing as possible, not only for the poorest of the poor, but also for broad parts of the population. Let's say the Swedish model. And this is the basis of all, I think, and this is the basis what actually the tenants also want from you. Provide as much as possible affordable housing for us. This is really responsible housing. We know that this is nearly too good to be true, and we have to have a very tough reality check on that. And we know that there are many, many forces that are against this mission at the moment. And one of the biggest forces against us is, unfortunately, at European level, where we meet, Secodas and the International Union of Tenants. And in my impression, let's say I'm working there for 5 years, not so long as Claire, but since we have been there, we've been working very closely together. We are just defending. And that is not our mission, actually, because, dear social landlords, what you are doing is quite good. And what we have been listening today, these were, of course, allow me to say it, these were lighthouse projects. I mean, if you don't invite somebody here to present something which is not so good and perfect, I come to ADIS later. But I think these are lighthouse projects, but this is not the reality. And our chance is, of course, we have it now, in these times where we have, let's say it politically, we have some enemies at the moment who want to, tear the sector down. Who are these enemies? Of course, you know it. Private investors, institutional investors. We have a real concurrence at the moment. And I think what makes you so special is, and this is what you should underline more and more, you provide affordable housing. This is the core mission. And this you should do more and more, which means also, let me speak frankly, not only invest in energy refurbishment, please construct more. We need more construction. Why is this so important? I mean, it's our first interest. You need to have more construction because we have to keep the level of the rents low. And if you just reinvest all your profits you make from the rents in energy refurbishment, we don't have new houses. That's the problem. And we need new houses. There has been, since the 80s, a stop of investment in affordable public social housing in our sector. Claire, I like this expression very much, she calls it the lost years. And that's the truth. So perhaps we should, in a way, work more together to achieve this goal, to convince people to provide financing for housing associations, to create a political sphere where it is necessary to say housing policy is one of the major pillars of our welfare states we have. Without a home, a person cannot be part of a society. He is totally excluded. Being homelessness is the major form of social exclusion. And what are you doing? You provide homes for people. So this might be an idea. Go back to your basic mission. Go back to that, what is really your job. Perhaps not think so much in commercial terms. I know in Sweden you have to work like business plans, but everybody does it. That's not the point. What I mean is many housing providers, they try to, in a way, create a concurrence with the institutional, the commercial investors. They thought, okay, on the commercial sector, I can make more money. Of course, that's common knowledge. But is this really your mission? And is this something you should do? Do you really want to interfere with, let's say, the private investors who are launching now complaints against you? So perhaps think about this business strategy more and think back to your basic mission you should have. But who am I to tell something like that? I'm just a tenants representative, but give me just an example, also from the stakeholder forum. It was said, yeah, of course, it might be quite interesting to have tenants on the boards of housing associations. We can talk to them, of course. We will talk with them. But they will never decide. They have no economical background. That's true, ladies and gentlemen. We don't have an economical background. We are not trained to be in the boards of housing associations. We are no CFOs, we are no CEOs, we are just the residents. That's it. But perhaps it might be a good idea if you already say, okay, you accept us to take some decisions in your boards, to give us a little bit of training, to also tell us something about the figures you are presenting, tell us also something about your economical decisions you take, tell us something about, let's say, your strategy about the overall environment of the area, what you are going to do. It might be interesting to talk to the people because they really know the area where they are living in. And they know, because of their practical experience, what is necessary as an investment, as well in the apartments, in the dwellings, as well as in the environment. So just talk to them, and perhaps that would be my appeal. Try to also train the tenants' representatives who are already in the boards. Then I'm talking about countries like France or Denmark, where we have quite a far-going residence democracy. But we need to have more, let's say, knowledge to be really on the same level playing field. Level playing field, that's also, I think, a term interesting to talk about. We, as the tenants organizations, we are quite well organized, as I may say. We have political lobbies at home, on European level, on national level, on regional level, on local level. Perhaps responsible housing would be also to talk to each other on level playing field when it comes, for instance, to decisions about lobbying. Just an experience we had. We have been the most successful, I think it was in the year 2009, 2010 in Brussels, Claire, when we both, the housing associations, the social housing providers, and the tenants said, we need European money to have some good investment in the energy refurbishment of the housing stock. We can't do it alone. When we were there as one lobby in Brussels, we had a super success. It was quite easy, actually. It was quite easy to open the European Regional Development Funds. It was very good, and now your organizations are profiting from it. So perhaps it's an idea to be not so concentrated on your business, but open your eyes and see, okay, there are other people who are actually doing the same lobby like you, because we want the same. We want more affordable housing. There is no difference between our lobbies, and perhaps liaise a little bit more. This brings me perhaps to some things that are not working so well. Huh? Just always tenants, water and the wine. It's incredible. What is not working so good? I give you some examples. I tell you, for instance, just to start with my home country, Germany. We just have a new coalition. So, and the contract of the new coalition of the Conservatives and the Social Democrats has been published 1 hour ago. And there is a total change in the rental system of Germany, because we will have a way back to regulation. We will have a rent price stop. We will have a cap on the rents. This is really sensational. But I have to say, our social housing providers in Germany, they were against it. And I still can't imagine why. Why? I think it is necessary, it is your basic mission to provide affordable housing. And if the rents are increasing, the social housing providers should also say, hey, stop. Another point, complaints.
Barbara, just
two points.
Really, the 2 minutes.
Okay, 2 points.
Maximum.
Yes, 2 points. France, we had the complaint of the French private landlords. Of course, the complaint was directly to lower income limits in France. Incredible. I mean, where do we have big housing shortages? In France, especially Île-de-Paris, Paris, the region. I don't know any, let's say, worst housing situation than this. So we had the complaint of the French private landlords. They said, okay, the income levels are too high in France, too many people have access to affordable housing. And what did our colleagues say from the French housing providers? Yeah, okay, but our tenants already pay an extra rent, a sur loyer. And we said, can that be the right strategy in policy making? I don't know. Go back to your mission. Provide affordable housing. Last but not least, my last critics, the Netherlands. I know it is very tricky in the Netherlands, but let's say the Dutch housing associations made also some major mistakes. You want to be commercial too much. That's it. And now you have the bill which is presented by the government. But what did you do? Okay, you have to pay this extra tax of nearly 2 billion. And what did you do? You said, okay, that's really a pity, but then we have to increase the rents. Is this something where you have a stakeholder involvement? Did you ask us? Did you ask the tenants organizations if this might be the best way? You didn't. You didn't even talk to us. So I think to end up, excuse me for being so frank, but there is a lot of things to do. We are ready to cooperate with you. We have some good ideas. And perhaps take the chance and talk to us. Because, let me quote the famous Paul Watzlawick, you cannot not communicate. Thank you.
I think now I will first ask Alexander, do you want to answer from on the Dutch situation in the Dutch example, or?
2 remarks very shortly. The example about the extra taxation of about 2 billion euros a year inevitably leads to a rent increase. I mean, you have to pay it one way or the other, because on the other hand, as Barbara pointed out understandably, a lot of money also has to be invested in building new housing, in maintenance of housing, and if you then also have to pay 2 billion in tax a year, it has to come from somewhere, because Dutch social housing organizations have already made large cuts in their costs. Lots of people losing their jobs right now within the sector. So at some point you have to get the money somewhere. And in Holland, fortunately, we also have a system whereby people on the lowest incomes get support in order to pay their rent. So it is always hard to take certain measures, but on the other hand, this was the right mix to do, probably. And then on the last point, in involving stakeholders, it is always hard if you are invited by the government for exclusive talks on trying to mitigate the negative consequences of national policy making, or political policy making. Well, you have to make choices. You have to calculate and see how you can get the best result, the most effective way of, well, achieving what you're there for, which is in the end provide affordable housing in a sustainable way. And that's the reason why these choices were made. But I'm the first one to admit that stakeholders were not involved in this deal. That's absolutely true.
Okay, maybe I will ask, Germany and maybe France also to react on what Barbara said, or on other things, maybe Özgur.
Thank you very much, Charlotte, and thank you very much, Barbara. As the second victim, I would like to give a brief response. I very much appreciate the way how you touched different member states and the situation between housing associations, social housing providers, and tenants organizations. Just to give you an update, it's quite difficult to talk about the German rental cap system, which is now discussed in a very short way as I have it now. But you know, it was a common lobbying between German Housing Association, my association, and the German Tenants Union to oppose to that. Just to give you then an update on that. But we can't really go into the details because it is an introduction of a system which might suit some metropolitan areas, some regions maybe in Germany, but to put a federal law on that, to introduce a federal law, that is quite difficult. But I would like to invite all colleagues to discuss it also later on.
Maybe just Barbara, before you answer, I don't know if Laurent, if you want, or if someone wants to answer on the French side what was said. No? Okay, so Barbara, you answer, and then we open to other questions.
Yeah, let's say we can now play ping pong. There were, let's say, in Germany there were several other statements made by the German housing associations, because they said any rent cap will have a direct negative influence on the overall construction, because nobody will invest anymore in housing. And we were, of course, against that. But okay, I didn't want to blame the housing associations here. That was not my deal here. I just wanted to tell you, if you want to talk on level playing field, you have to accept sometimes that we tell how we see the situation. And that is belonging to it. And from my experience, it is always good to learn from mistakes. And we made some major lobby mistakes in the past because I think we were not self-conscious enough. I mean, what you are doing is a very good thing. You are doing very important things for the community, for the local communities, also for the state. You give jobs to people. We have seen it today. You, in a way, change complete areas, not only estates, but areas. So my idea is, with this responsible housing initiative, focus on that. There we can help you, because we are your clients. We can tell about it, what you are doing. But on the other hand, allow us on the same time and on the same level also to change a little bit your policy. Where the policy has been drawn in direction to make profits, it should come back to that where we started from, to have non-profit housing, affordable housing for many, many people, and not only the poorest of the poor. This is my appeal.
Well, I think we will end on that, and just we have, I think, 5 minutes left, or 7 minutes maybe. Are there questions in the audience? No questions, no comments. Yeah.
There might be a comment. I'm Jørgen Jensen. I'm a board member in IoT. I'm from Denmark, but I'm representing international too, not employed like Barbara. If we take history, back in the 90s, when I was in England, listening about what happened in England, I thought what happened in England would never come to Denmark, the selling of public housing. What I was told in England was that one of the things in England is there was no tenant participation. So it's quite easy to sell off doing Thatcher regime. The idea of selling came to Denmark 10 years ago, but it didn't work in Denmark. In Denmark, you have a very strong tenant participation. And BL, who's making this meeting, they were quite strong in getting off this policy of selling off, because there's a very strong tenant democracy. So it shows that tenants participating really works to keep off bad policies. What's also very important, and that's one of the reasons this meeting seems very important and very good, is that we're in it together, because the Dutch were hit by European policies, the Swedes were hit by the French, they tried to intervene, and we're afraid in Denmark. And why? Because there's parts of Europe where it really doesn't work. So where it still works, where there still is some power to do something, we have to show that this is a part of the solution. So I think it's quite good what's happening here. And I know by the years I've been working in the International Union that we started by just exchanging what's happening in your countries. But right now we know it's quite important that we cooperate, because the very liberal forces, they've been cooperating for a lot of years to kind of limit in this sector.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Yeah.
Die junge Dame vom Wohnbund hat mich natürlich etwas irritiert. Ich bin 20 Jahre hier in der Czechotas.
Well, good afternoon. I've been here for 20 years. I come from Austria. Of course, we are not creating profit. We are a not-for-profit organization. So, if an organization has equities in the amount of 118 million, those 118 million should be invested. Otherwise, it will be quite difficult for the future generations. So, I've just heard that your organization is there to care for people who already have a flat or a dwelling. I think it's a bit selfish. We should think of those people who don't have a flat or an accommodation yet. We should act in solidarity with those people.
Does anyone want to answer to that?
Dann mache ich jetzt auch mal eine Antwort auf Deutsch. Ja, natürlich. Also wir haben die gemacht.
Okay, I will answer in German. Yeah, of course, we have not-for-profit organizations which follow a totally different structure and a totally different pattern. But I think you should have listened carefully to what I said. What we have now at the European level is a series of complaints. And according to those complaints, we should really focus on the not-for-profit type of organization and focus really on cooperatives. There have been some very bad developments, like in Austria and other countries, where the social housing sector shifted towards profit-making operations. And so this is the bad move. So we try also to commit for people who don't have an apartment, which don't have a flat. However, we should not mix up the union of tenants with homeless people's organization. We try really to act for our members. Our members are tenants, and we try to promote their rights, their interests, and make sure that evictions don't take place.
I don't know how to answer or react, or if anyone wants to answer, but unfortunately, actually, I think we have to stop very, very, very soon, so I don't see any more question. One question, very, 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 very short.
Je vais être très bref, je viens.
I'll be very brief. I come from a very small country where the percentage of public housing is pretty low. We have about 7% of public housing, social housing for the whole country. So I fully agree that our first role is to increase the existing stock and that we should struggle to get the necessary means to do so. The social housing companies in my country are not profit-making companies, but rather companies that try to break even. I won't dwell at length on the Belgian system because we have three systems, the Walloon, the Brussels and the Flemish systems. But I might refer to a measure that's been taken about evictions. In my country, a social landlord is not allowed to evict during the winter period, and he's not allowed to evict when the tenant or tenants commit to engage into a budget follow-up scheme together with the social center. The local, in each and every municipality, there is a social service center. And so if the tenant is engaged into a budget monitoring scheme, he cannot be evicted.
The tenants and the social actors that are present in the area. I think we'll have to end up here. There have been some hot debates around here, and I think that's also what we are here for, and I'm glad that Barbara could come, and I think we have to hear also sometimes things that we don't want to necessarily hear at first hand. Well, we'll finish here. I think my concluding words will be that I think there are many different ways of engaging with stakeholders, and of course, I don't think we should force into one simple model. It wouldn't work anyway. So what we're trying to do again with our project is to collect as many examples as possible of different ways of working with tenants, but also with other stakeholders, so that we have a big collection, and then housing providers and housing federations can look at what they want to do and examples and basically choose what suits them most. I will end up here, and thank you very much.